All right, so welcome back to Genesis Bible Study, and we are talking about Genesis 36 today. I don't know if we're going to have anybody here, and that is fine. So we will pray in, and then we will get started. And I just ask Father God that we are blessed in our endeavor to puzzle out what goes on in Genesis 36, maybe 37, maybe 38. We're so grateful, God, that we get to come together, fellowship, worship, and learn your word today. I ask God for your guidance, your protection, your provision, your eyes to see and your ears to hear, that I'm out of the way, and that your supernatural understanding through the Holy Spirit can come on our study today. And I ask this all in Yeshua's precious name, amen. Okay, so Genesis 36 is about Esau, which is obviously Edom, and of the current day, Russia. So now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom, right? So Esau is the person, Edom is the nation, right? He's not of the nation of Israel. He's his own separate nation. Anytime you get a lineage, it's going to be its own separate nation, right? So, like Genesis 4, the Kenite lineage is a whole separate nation from Genesis 5, the Adamic lineage, from Genesis 25, the Midianite, Keturah's lineage, right? From Genesis something with the Ishmaelite lineage, right? They're all separate lineages because they're all separate nations. Same is true here in Genesis 36. So Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan, Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite, and Bashemath, Ishmael's daughter, sister of Nebajoth. Right, so he's got three wives, all of different um, nations, right? We have the Hivites, we have the Ishmaelites, and we have the Hittites. So we have three different nations here working with Esau. And Adah bare Esau Eliphaz, and Bashemath bare Ruel, and Aholibamah bare Jeush, and Jalam, and Korah. These are the sons of Esau, which were born unto him in the land of Canaan. So a little bit like his brother here, that he's got multiple wives bearing multiple children. Oh, we have somebody in. Hey, Terry. I started the teaching just to start it because obviously I waited for a little bit. Okay. Um so apparently some people are in the wrong rooms and the wrong things, and I just was like, you know what, everyone will figure it out. So we're in Genesis 36 and talking about how Esau is kind of like Jacob in that Jacob has four wives and multiple kids by those wives. Esau has three wives and multiple kids by those wives. And so we're just here in Genesis 36:6. And Esau took his wives and his sons and his daughters and all the persons of his house and his cattle and all his beasts and all his substance, which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob. And so we see that he's migrating, he's moving. He doesn't want to be in the kind of place that now that Isaac is dead, because Isaac just got buried, right, in Genesis 35:29. He doesn't really want to be near Jacob. Jacob has a lot of substance, and him and Jacob have never fully gotten along. And even in the last reconciliation attempt, it didn't really go the way it could have gone. So Esau relocates himself with all of his stuff, not unlike what we see with Abraham and Lot, not unlike what we see with Jacob and Laban. Sometimes when the plenty gets too plenteous, the division has to happen. And we're about to see, for their riches were more than that land might dwell. I'm sorry, for their riches were more than that they might dwell together, and the land wherein they were strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. Okay, and so again, we've talked about this before. The Edomites, they eventually become Russia. And so he goes to toward that land. Of course, Mount Seir is not terribly far now. Well, now and the moment in the text. Now, not now, because now they're in Russia. And so we're going to see the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in Mount Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Adah, the wife of Esau; Ruel, the son of Bashemath, the wife of Esau. And the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, and Gatam, and Kenaz. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't Tiananmen Square in Russia? No. Um, hmm. Um,
Tiananmen
let's
Square is in China.
Tiananmen Square's in China. What is
I,
in Russia that I'm thinking of that reminds me of Timan?
um,
Not St. Petersburg.
uh,
Not. I don't know why I thought there was like a something with a T in Russia, but
maybe.
outside of the czars,
Hmm.
TZ, but no. Um, and that's fine. And Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz's son, and she bare Eliphaz Amalek. These were the sons of Adah, Esau's wife. And these are the sons of Ruel, Nahath and Zerah, Shema and Mizah. These were the sons of Bashemath, Esau's wife. Right. And so I'm not going to go through all of them because it goes all the way through the end of Genesis 36. And what we are going to see, and I mentioned this at the beginning, is that every time we have a separate lineage, it's a whole separate nation. But look at the language around the Edomites, right? I want to go just a little further so we can get there. And these were the sons of Aholibamah, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Zibeon, Esau's wife, and she bare Esau, Jeush, and Jalem, and Korah. These were the dukes of the sons of Esau, the sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau: Duke Teman, Duke Omar, Duke Zepho, Duke Kenaz, Duke Korah, Duke Gatam, and Duke Amalek. These are the dukes that came of Eliphaz in the land of Edom. These were the sons of Adah. Now, if you should see, there's Peg. You should find her way in eventually. We should see here, and we should know that wealth has always followed these people, even though production hasn't always has eluded them, right? If you look at the history of Russia, if you look at their buildings and their royalty, their lineage, like the czars were always extraordinarily wealthy. And so these are well off, even though they are away from the fat of the land. Hey, Peg. And so we're in Genesis 36:17. And they're dukes, right? We see that they have a title that we've not yet seen. The Duke is a new title. And we have seen um, dukes in like Archduke Ferdinand, right? Who was, I think, World War One set him off. Not Russia. I think like what was it? Archduke Ferdinand, Austria, maybe. Trying to. My history is not the best. My history is my least favorite part of um, the biblical theology, literature, history. Least favorite. But dukes have always been kind of in the Austria, Hungary, Ottoman Empire area. We don't have a lot of dukes really elsewhere. Even in like the English monarchy, yes, you have dukes and duchesses, but you don't have them as frequently as you see them elsewhere. And so there is a nod to royalty here in Esau's line in the Edomites that is important not to overlook because technically, even though the promised seed is in Isaac called, right? Isaac, Jacob is Israel. Esau still is blessed to some degree. And so, again, Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated, essentially just loved less. So Esau does all right for himself. I'm not going to go through this entire lineage of the sons and the dukes because ultimately it's not it's not going to be pertinent to our study beyond this moment. But these are the names of the dukes that came from Esau according to their families after their places by their names: Duke Timnah, Duke Alva, Duke Jetheth, Duke Aholibamah, Duke Elah, Duke Pinon, Duke Kenaz, Duke Teman, Duke Mizbar, Duke Magdiel, Duke Imram, These be the dukes of Edom, according to their habitations in the land of their possession. He is Esau, the father of the Edomites. Right. And so we see, and again, for everybody coming in late, I made this point at the beginning of the discussion. Anytime we see a separate, like, lineage offshoot, it's a whole new nation, right? So we have the Kenites in Genesis 4, we have the Ishmaelites, we have the Midianite, the Keturah's line, we have the Moabites and the Ammonites. Like, anytime we get a new ite, as it were, right? It's a whole new nation. So Edom becomes his whole new nation, the red nation. And so, that's Russia. That's Esau. That is the lineage. If you want to go through on your own, by all means do. I don't see the point in wasting our kind of time on it, just because I'm not going to go into any depth outside of just reading it. These names don't bear any relevance down the line of the text, not really. So we're just going to go right into Genesis 37. This again is the Christ line. This is the promised elect people. So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, down. I was going to say Joseph, but no, because Judah and Levite are actually the ones through which Christ comes. And so when God shows up, he always says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Esau, not included in that direct lineage. And so Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. Now, again, we know this is a dangerous land. It was contentious then, it is contentious now. The Israelite Palestinian war conflict still and always will continue. There's not going to be peace over there until the false Christ comes. So everybody who's thinking, hey, we need peace, you don't know what you're asking for. No, you don't. You don't want peace, because this land has always been marked for contention. So when the minute we have peace is the minute we have a problem. And so we do not want that, actually. And so this land is a dangerous land, and it always has been. It's a coveted land. It's a land that a lot of people want. It's a holy land, and that's why. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. So he's with Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, right? He's not with any of Leah's kids. Dan, he will go on eventually to lose his birthright. Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, they kind of end up being minor in the 12 tribes. But basically, what Joseph is doing here at 17 is being a little tattletale, right? He's telling on his older brothers for doing things that they're not supposed to do. The term evil here is not actually evil as we will come to see it, but they definitely have the capacity for it. We'll see that in just a minute. Now Israel, and again, sacred name, changed name for Jacob here. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Now, so this is a couple things. The first is he is the firstborn of the most beloved wife, Rachel, right? So of course, he loves Joseph immensely. Second, this coat of many colors, it doesn't just show favoritism, which is certainly a big one here. It shows the blessing of the firstborn. It shows that he's getting the inheritance of his father at this moment in time, right? So this coat is very distinctive, but it's also like almost like a royal robe. It's like letting them know, like letting all the brothers know, Joseph is the one that gets the blessing. And so he definitely has the sort of priest coat here. Um, and when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Never great when we've got jealousy amongst the brethren. We know, kind of historically, that violence usually ensues when we've got jealousy amongst the brethren, or the threat thereof in the case of Esau, right? So not good when men want to fight with each other. So Joseph has not done anything wrong here. Joseph exists. Joseph is 17. He is favored by his father. Joseph's done nothing wrong. You will see in the entirety of the Joseph story, he has done nothing wrong. This is an important thing for me too, because we're switching gears into the Joseph story now, into the Joseph narrative. Um, this is always really important because, like, Jacob, maybe. Joseph, no. And so, even like the telling his brother's report, like, there's nothing wrong in doing that. You know, he's holding his own moral code. Joseph has a very high moral code. Joseph's story is perhaps one of my favorite in the entire Bible. Joseph's story is a good one if you don't know it. And so, he's not popular amongst his brothers because of how much his father loves him and how blessed he's going to be. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And that's not great. That's not great because Joseph here doesn't realize they do not have his best intentions. Joseph is 17, right? He does not realize they do not have his best intentions. So he doesn't realize how much they don't like him. So him saying, hey, your sheep's bowed to mine, not the best. Not the best. Um, And his brothers said unto him, the brothers kind of interpret the dream here. The brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. Now, if you know the Joseph story, spoiler alert, yes. But if you don't know the Joseph story, even in this moment, technically still yes, because he's got the blessing of the Father. So what they might be thinking in this moment is, we are going to be less than you because you get the blessing of our Father. You get the high level inheritance of our Father. We will see how very true this dream comes in a couple chapters. But they hate him, greatly hate him. And he has no real idea. But it's basically saying he's going to rule over them. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it to his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. Now again, Joseph not learning here, okay? They hate you, Joseph. Why do you keep telling him these things? The other thing that we're going to see is a two-dream motif in the Joseph story, right? Jacob had the one dream. Jacob had the one dream at Bethel at the start of his journey. He had another dream with the spotted, speckled cattle that God kind of taught him how to do husbandry work in the dream. But it wasn't back to back like this. The Joseph story is going to have back to back confirmation dreams 1, 2, 3 different times. So we're going to see that kind of coming up a lot. God never actually speaks to Joseph, but he talks to him in dreams a lot. And so I say this, I've said it before and I'll say it again. God talks to everybody a little differently. Joseph walks really close to God and never actually talks to him, which is very unlike Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who actually do have conversations and walk with God. Um, I'm not going to spoil anything here by saying this, probably. Joseph is only going to get one half of the blessing birthright. Joseph's going to get the blessing. Judah is going to get the birthright. We'll see that as we go. So things start to split and look different with Joseph's story, which is really interesting. So I talked about this on TikTok yesterday about how the sun and the moon and the stars are really important. If you watched it, cool. If you didn't, check it out. But here we're going to see, well, let me let the text interpret it. So 37:10. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? So the father has the same response as his sons, which is, no, you're not going to rule over me. Spoiler alert, yeah, he is. Like, because these dreams are prophetic and from God. So, like, sorry, not sorry, guys. The other thing is, Jacob interprets it for us here. The sun is Jacob, the moon is not necessarily Rachel because she's dead at this point, right? So it could be a different mother. And the brethren, of course, are the 11 stars. But we also get, of course, 11 of the 12 of the zodiac signs as well. We have this play happen a lot. We'll see it also in Revelation 12, where it can mean one thing on one level and then another thing on another level, right? So we will have it mean on the microcosm of the Joseph story, mother, father, brethren. On the macrocosm of Israel, the entire nation of the Israelites. So it is a when we see sun and moon and stars, it's a lot of different things that it hits on a lot of different levels. I will probably need to go into that more elsewhere because that one's pretty, there's a lot going on with it. Anyway, so Jacob's not happy either. No one's happy with Joseph right now. No one's happy that Joseph is saying he's going to get this kind of leg up over everybody else because his father rebukes him, right? It's not just like a oh, what are you saying? It's a don't say that. That's not true. And so his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying, right? So he's like, Jacob's been around, he knows some things. He's not happy about it, but he's like, maybe there's something here. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Now remember Shechem, that's where Dinah was raped. Because remember, Levi and Simeon raised it and they took all the spoils and they settled there. And so there is a flock still in Shechem, and nobody, contrary to what Jacob said a few chapters back, has done anything about it because the God of Israel is with them. Ain't nobody going to attack them. Not in their right mind. Why would you? So there are still flocks in Shechem. There's still plenty of things to do with all the animals. And so they're a little way off. Shechem's a little way off, if you guys remember from the map. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, here I am. Right? I'm ready. I'll go check on them. I'll go see. And he said to him, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out unto the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Joseph is really just doing what his dad is telling him to do here. Joseph, a lot of times, is just doing what he thinks is the thing that he's supposed to do. The other thing with Joseph here is 17 years old, he could have easily been in the fields, right? That was not the age of accountability, right? 13 was the age of accountability. So he's not in the fields. Younger than his brothers, though he could be in the field. Remember, Reuben's in the field with the mandrakes at like 15 years old. So even here, Joseph is kind of acting as a manager for his older brothers who are actually laboring. So we're already getting that sort of divide between the brothers in this sort of managerial position because there's really nothing that should keep Joseph from the flock. I mean, David was tending the flock at like 8. So we see that Jacob is keeping Joseph close to him. And he's sending him on a managerial errand. And so a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. No introductions here. And the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. So we want to ask, of course, who's this man? Who is this man? There is no great evidence to suggest it is Jesus, but there's also some evidence to say it could be. Because on one hand, it could just be a passerby who happened to see the brethren kind of, they would be 10 of them, strapping lads with a lot of like stuff going on. So they would draw the eye. But the thing that always makes me think this could be Jesus, but again, open to your interpretation here, is the fact that Joseph is wandering in the field. That's very biblical language for like lost in the world. And so it seems here like Joseph is a little lost. He doesn't know what the next step is. And so it could very well be Jesus coming in and giving him that guiding place, that guiding information of where to go next on the journey. Because this is actually going to be really pivotal. If the man, who may or may not be Jesus, I tend to think it could be, but again, hesitant to say. If Joseph didn't find his brothers at Shechem and he goes home, the story's very different, which you will see in a moment. But since Joseph hears from this man that they are in Dothan, which means two wells, wells will become important. They always are. The whole trajectory of the Joseph story is different. So perhaps this is Christ directing Joseph in the next steps of where to go so the prophecies can be fulfilled. But we never want to read too much into the text. And so it could very well be somebody who's just there, a man who sees him that heard his brother say they're going to Dothan. And we don't have concrete evidence that it is Jesus. I would go 70-30, Jesus to stranger. I would go 70-30. Because there's no introduction either, right? And so something's out of custom there. But so he goes to the two wells. He goes to Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. This is premeditated murder. Cain did the same thing. God judges premeditated murder differently than he judges not premeditated murder. The actual commandment, thou shalt not kill, the language in the Hebrew is actually thou shalt not premeditate murder. So a lot of times if you have people who are veterans, let's say, and they've actually killed people in the line of duty, and they are Christian or they become Christian, they get really guilt laden with that. And they need not, because there's a difference between premeditated murder because you feel some type of way and crimes in the heat of the moment, crimes that are meant as a sort of consequence of an action that are mandated by God. So it's not a one size fits all. Kind of like the court of law now, you know, it does kind of distinguish. But this is premeditated murder. They're conspiring against him when he is far away, which is problematic. If they were to actually go through with it, it'd be very problematic. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say some evil beast had devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. Joke's on them. They are going to see what becomes of his dreams. That's a fact. But they don't really feel bad about this. This is 10 of the brothers, right? Like Benjamin's not included here. Joseph obviously is Joseph. So 10 out of 12 brothers want him dead. And all Joseph is trying to do is what he was told to do. All the time. Joseph's just trying to do the best he can with what he's got. And Reuben heard it. He's the eldest. And he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him unto his father again. Right? So what he's saying here is, you know what? Let's not kill him. So we're innocent. We don't want to get in trouble here. We'll just chuck him in this well, and we'll just leave him there. And secretly, he's thinking to himself, I'm going to come get him later and give him back to dad. So Reuben is conspiring in his favor here. Um, he's playing it smart. He's not. Now, there's a good chance, right? Because Reuben, if you remember in Genesis 35:22, laid with Bilhah. If you remember, Reuben is the one who slept with his father's concubine. So Reuben here might be trying to make an amends. Like, hey, I don't want to be on bad terms with my father. I don't want to kill his favorite son. I already had sex with one of his wives. Like, let me not here. So, and Reuben again is the oldest. And so this could be, and again, could here. There's not biblical evidence of this, just me kind of paralleling. Could be on his conscience, like I already did my father wrong. Let me not do this grievous thing too. And so Reuben is the one that speaks up here, which again does take courage, no matter what the motivation was. It does take courage to speak up to essentially a mob at this point. And so his plan is to get him later, chuck him down the well for now. And again, the plan on the surface is he'll die from starvation rather than us actually being the ones that killed him in cold blood. And of course, that's not actually what Reuben plans to do underneath. And it comes to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. Remember, there were two wells. Dothan means two wells. One was dried. The other one would have drowned him. So 50-50 Russian roulette here, which one they threw him down. Miraculously, nothing happens to him as far as like bones broken, because wells do go pretty deep. And of course, we know that when you're cast down a dry well, it is like a sort of prison. It is a sort of pit. There is no good way out of it on your own. You can't climb out of it, right? So it is a little bleak for Joseph here. Oh, somebody's entering the room. I don't know who it is. Hello. So it is a little bleak for Joseph here. And they take his coat off of him, right? So he doesn't have that anymore. And they sit down to eat, right? They sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites come from Gilead with their camels, bringing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And again, we see sort of God working in the brethren here, because Ishmael is a distant relative of Joseph, right? So we see the Ishmaelites and the Midianites eventually making traffic down to Egypt. We'll see that a fair amount, because in the Joseph story, not the Joseph story, in the Moses story, when Moses is cast out, he ends up marrying a Midianite priestess, who of course is also his relative. Well, distant relative at that point, many cousins removed. And so Judah says now, right? So major players, we got Reuben and then we got Judah. Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content, right? So now we've got Judah also coming to his rescue here and saying, let's just sell him instead, and he'll be not our problem anymore, but also then we won't be guilty of murder. And at some point, because I know it says they sat down to eat bread, but at some point Reuben must have left because he didn't know about this. So the they that sat down does not include Reuben. Reuben was not in this decision. You're going to see that in like a few little verses. So the they that sat down, Judah, and maybe some of the rest of them, not all of them. So we don't get the point in the narrative where Reuben exits stage left, but he's gonna come back and he's like, what the hell happened? And so And this was me getting a little ahead of myself also, sorry. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph unto Egypt. Everything about this is biblical. Please listen. Okay. Someone asked me today about like typology of Christ. This is a big one. The Joseph story is a big one. The Joseph story, Joseph is a type of savior. Okay. Joseph is a type of Christ figure. So the big thing here, he's sold as a slave for 20 pieces of silver. You know who else going to be sold out like a slave for 30 pieces of silver? Jesus is the answer there, guys. A one. Two, he's out of the pit, right? Well, guess who else was in a pit for 3 days and 3 nights? Right? So everything about this is going to become very biblical. We also have, like I kind of just alluded to, the nod to Moses, because Moses will also be sort of cast out and he'll be cast to the Midianites in Egypt. Right? So the things all interplay here because they're all one big family, one big direct family, not in the way everybody belongs to God and we're all family, which is true as well. But this is more specific, right? The Midianites are Abraham's second wife's children. So they all share grandpas. So there's a more direct tie here. But this is like a very cheap sell. Joseph sold like under the price of a slave, basically. And so, like I said, he had to be lifted up out of the pit because he wasn't getting out of it by himself. And again, poor Joseph. What has he done to deserve this? And the answer is nothing. And so this always is a good lesson for you. If you feel like you are in the pit of life and you have done nothing to deserve it, do not forget that God can and does work everything to the good for those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. Joseph is a huge, huge symbol of that. And here to the point I made before, Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? Right? He's terribly upset. So he, like I said, is at some point got removed from them because he comes back unawares and he's like, you guys have foiled my plan. What the heck happened? I know he didn't get out of that pit by himself. Where can I go to get him? Basically saying, what'd you guys do to him? Because he knows it's got to be them. And he thinks, oh, you know what? They must have went through with some kind of sadistic plan. They did, just not in a way that he can reconcile it. And so the answer that we don't get, that Reuben does get, is probably the story about how he's sold into slavery and he's well on his way to Egypt. But we're not going to see that. What we do see is they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in blood. And they sent the coat of many colors and they brought it to their father and said, this have we found. Now know whether it be thy son's coat or no. Of course, the deception here, of course. Now, like I said with the Jacob story, there's always deception in the Jacob story. Now he's reaping back some of the deception he did that maybe was unfounded because he's being deceived here because they're lying to him, obviously. They know, first off, they orchestrated the whole thing. Second off, they stripped the coat. They beat him and took his coat, so they know who it is. So the deception here is a continuation of the deception in the Jacob story. And of course, Jacob knew it and said, it is my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Which is always so sad, because basically Jacob is vowing here to never get over this. This is smart on the sons, that they allow him to make his own observations, right? They allow him to consider what might be the case. The fact is, though, Jacob doesn't even suspect his sons. the only logical conclusion Jacob can come to is that, oh, he must have been killed by an animal, because there's no reality where my sons killed my other son. There's no reality with that, which of course makes sense. Why would Jacob even think that? The other thing here that adds sort of salt to the wound is Jacob sent Joseph on this errand. So the guilt that Jacob has to be feeling here of like, I sent him to his death. So doubly, triply, quadruply upset here that Joseph is quote unquote dead. Obviously he's not. That he was the one that sent him on this errand, and that, of course, he thinks it was an untimely sort of animal that got to him, which was, of course, a very real threat in this time. And so, the struggle for Jacob here is very real. And the Midianites, now we flash back, right? Because this is how the narrative works. It flashes here, it flashes there, it flashes there, but the time is still going on. So the sons go back to Jacob and tell him, but Joseph is still in transport to Egypt. So, we're seeing both here. And so flip it quickly out of Canaan to Egypt. You're going to get this flip a lot in the text, by the way. What happens in Canaan, then what happens in Egypt, then we're in Egypt for a while, then we're back in Canaan for essentially the next 12 chapters, until they're all reunited again in Egypt. So the Midianites sold him. Now, again, we know this him is Joseph, right? It's not the father, it's not any of the sons, but we're going back. The him is going all the way back to when they sold him 10 verses ago. The Midianites sold Joseph into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and the captain of the guard. So he was sold into a very high-ranking official's. He's sold to Pharaoh, basically, because Pharaoh's captain of the guard is basically like his chief commanding officer. So he's already got this is actually already an advantageous position. Pharaoh's chief military strategist, Joseph. Right? So this is pretty good for Joseph. And that sets us up, Genesis 37 sets us up for the dreams that we hear about in the beginning of the chapter to start to come to fruition. Now, I'm actually going to probably stop us there because Genesis 38 is a complete flip it back to Canaan. It's all about Judah. And so we just leave Joseph for a hot minute and flip back to his brother. So we're gonna touch on Genesis 38, and then Genesis 39 brings us back to the Joseph story. So technically, if I wanted to, and I don't, I could just go from 37 to 39 to continue with the Joseph story. There is a reason, and it's a good one, which we'll talk about next time, why Genesis 38, a lot of scholars contend this. And they try to make the point that the Judah narrative from Genesis 38 exists out of time. It shouldn't be put in this way. Now, I disagree greatly because I think it makes total sense that we see what happens to both of the brethren who get the blessings. Because Judah and Joseph are the two that get the blessings. So it makes sense that we see what happens to them both. Spoiler for Genesis 38, the way predecessors of Christ are born there. So it's very important for us to read Genesis 38, and it certainly does not exist out of time. It just breaks up the Joseph narrative a little bit. So just be ready for this really interesting thing to happen where the text is trying to cover viewpoints of like 4 different people. It's trying to cover Joseph, it's trying to cover Jacob, it's trying to cover Judah. And then we see Simeon and Benjamin kind of like thrown in there as well. So it's interesting how it tries to do that. So just be mindful, timing runs parallel, even though the narrative runs like this. Does that make sense? And so that's Genesis 37. Questions on Genesis and 36. technically. So questions on Genesis 36 or Genesis 37 or any thoughts or anything coming up?
Still doing my thing, taking notes and
Yeah,
like slowly keep it up.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So you were talking about the Edomites and the Canaanites, and how are these? And you were talking about the ites, meaning the nations. So is that different than the 12 tribes?
Yes,
How?
100%.
I mean, I know.
So Adam to Adam to Jacob and the 12 from there are the 12 tribes. Then we get offshoots. Adam, first off, Cain is not in Adam's lineage. So Cain is over here.
Right,
Like Adam to Jacob, Cain.
right. And those are
So
the
he's his
Canaanites.
own, he is the parable of the sower, right? Like he's the one that the enemy came in and sowed the tares. These are the tares. So they're they are coming just along. That's the parallel here. So this is the Adamic to the 12 tribes, the Israelite people. This is the Kenites, enemies of. What's going to happen is they, because they are cursed to be vagabonds, are going to link right up to Judah, and they're going to become scribes, and they're going to become the Rechabites, and they're going to start manipulating the text. But for now, that's the Kenites. Genesis 4, Genesis 5. Adam down to Jacob. Well, here at Abraham, we've got Ishmael, right? And then here at Isaac, we've got Esau. And then here we've got Lot, the Ammonites and the Moabites. So they are offshoots of this main line. The Edomites, the Ishmaelites, the Moabites, and the Ammonites. They're all related to the patriarchs in some way, but they're not the direct lineage thereof. What's going to happen from Adam to Jacob, we're going to have a pretty direct line. But what's going to happen then from Jacob, we're going to get this.
Okay.
This very spread out 12 tribes that are still direct descendants of Adam.
Okay.
So the 12 tribes are direct descendants of Jacob, Isaac, Abraham, Noah, Adam. Shem, Noah, I should say.
Okay.
We also have those offshoots, Japheth and like Canaan. They're offshoots from Noah. So Adam to Jacob, Noah gives us some offshoots with Japheth and with Ham and Canaan, because they're related to Adam, they're related to Noah, but they're not related to the blessing covenantal people,
The 12 tribe.
to the 12 tribes.
12
So
tribes.
the 12 tribes, well, Abraham is the first person with whom God makes a covenant. It's not true. Adam is the first person God makes a covenant with, but it's very conditional and also it doesn't go well. Noah is technically the first person God makes a covenant with because he says he will never destroy the earth again, right? So he's making a covenant on behalf of creation with Noah. These people have always been elect people. Adam was elected, which is just to say set apart, set aside, trying to be better, trying to be God's representatives in the land. Like they were called to be a holy people. And that is why, like, is not everybody called to be a holy people? At that time, no. No, they weren't. Because we had a lot of nations that recognized God of Isaac and Abraham, but did not worship him. So, Adam elect, Noah elect, Abraham elect. God made covenants with all of them. But the 12 tribes are direct descendants of Jacob, Isaac, Abraham, Shem, Noah, Enoch, Methuselah, Adam. You can trace that lineage. And so that's super important because that is the lineage through which Christ comes. He comes from Judah and Levi, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, because Mary is both half Levite. You know that because she's related to Elizabeth. Elizabeth's a full Levite because she's married to a Levitical priest. And then Mary's father was a Judahite. So we know that. Something to always just be aware of. Matthew gives a genealogy of Joseph, which just demonstrates that he's a very fit stepfather for Jesus. But it bears no relevance to the birth of Jesus, not actually. The only lineage that actually traces the line of Christ is in Luke. And it goes from God to Jesus. So the entire Bible is about this family most directly, but also the surrounding nations that actually sort of come from this family, for the most part, fighting, brother to brother fight. Because these people are more blessed, because they're supposed to be held to a higher standard. Did they do a good job of it? No, they didn't. But were they doing a better job of it than everybody around them? Mostly, yes. Not always, because they started to do the things of the nations around them. Problematic. Obviously upset the Lord greatly. Obviously, here we are 4,000 years later. So, very, very good question. But again, Kenites are not even anything.
Right.
They are a wicked line. And that's also allowed and necessary because the wicked ones that chose Satan in the first earth age, that did not decide in Genesis 6 to go leave their habitation, also have to be born down. So the question always is, can a Kenite, i.e. somebody who picked Satan in the first earth age and got born here in the flesh and did wicked, wicked things, can a Kenite be converted? And that answer is yes. Yes, they can. If they are here in the flesh, they've already fulfilled one condition, which is come down and decide for yourself again. Do a lot of them do it? No. They like wickedness. They like evil. Think rapists, murderer, sociopaths, child rapists. Think the people who actually like evil. There are a lot of them. At the end of the millennium, there will still be people who pick Satan. Unfortunately. Very sad, very true. So, Adam's line, Cain's line, Satan's line, but Adam's line, nations. If I had a board behind me, I'd be able to really draw that out a lot better. But that's a really great question. It's a very great, very, very good question.
This is one of the things, like when I tried to read the Bible on my own, I would get bogged down in this one gave birth to this one. But it's a lot easier the way you're explaining it for me to kind of follow the lineage and why it's so important.
Yeah, I'm seeing in my head, and I don't have the ability to do it. I'm seeing in my head how I'd want to draw that out. Maybe I will do that. Maybe I'll make a diagram of it to kind of better like put it somewhere and explain it. But yeah, I always go back to the point. This is just a tree. It's just a network of people. It's just a tree, a family tree, a large one, extraordinarily large. And again, the larger it gets, the more things we need, right? So when we just had Adam, we needed one commandment. Well, when they come out of Egypt, they need like 10 commandments, right? And so and they needed like 5 different types of offerings, and they needed like 10 different feast days, and they needed like all this stuff all the time. Um, and so just progressive unfolding, just progressive unfolding. But good questions. Other questions, and of course, I'm always happy to help. Happy to help. Happy to help. Anything else coming? It doesn't only have to be about Genesis 36 and 37, though it certainly can be. Otherwise, we can close it out in prayer and we can call it for the night. Just don't want to do so prematurely. You guys missed the incoming prayer. Many apologies on that one. But all right. Oh, Demita, I wondered if that was you. Hello. Okay. Hey, God. We started off with none and we got 4. What a great day. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4. What a great day, Lord. I am really, really blessed and always humbled to be able to teach these things that are, on one hand, so evident in the text, and on the other hand, can be so very confusing and sort of complicated. And so I am grateful to you, Lord, that we are able to piece it out and make it make sense in a way that is palatable for everyone. And I know that is your doing, so I'm so grateful to you for that. Thank you for giving us eyes to see and ears to hear with understanding, so that we can really get the depth of how massive the scope of this family and this text and this word and this life really is. And God, as we go through the first half of the week, we just asked for your blessings. We ask for your protection, for your guidance, for your provision. We ask for you to keep a hedge up. And we ask for opportunities, Lord, where we can be a blessing to others. We ask all of this in Yeshua's precious name. Amen. All right. And we will just, this was my first time joining. Hey, T. Lee.
Okay,
Yes.
I have a question for you, but I couldn't figure out how to unmute my stupid
Anita, do you
microphone.
want me to keep it on the recording or off?
You can take it off.
Okay, let me